take up file item 21, Senator De Leon. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 350 by Senator De Leon, an act relating to energy.
Senator De Leon.
Members, today we stand up to address a global issue, but one that has severe local impacts. Salvador Mendoza from Fresno spent most of his life as a farm worker in the valley. He and his wife, Ricarda, came from Mexico over 30 years ago and started a family. Several years ago, he had to stop working after being diagnosed with a life-threatening idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and a fungal infection in his lungs. He has difficulty breathing every day and has been struggling to keep up with his medical bills. Roy Rivera from Sacramento, who lives just a 10-minute drive from here in Fruit Ridge Manor. He also suffers from a respiratory disease, living with a disability on a fixed income. He and his partner, Roger, have been together for 25 years, and now Roger serves as his caregiver. Roy and Salvador are just two stories among the millions of Californians in the Valley who live in the most polluted communities in the nation. And this is just not a problem for the San Joaquin Valley. Colleagues, 6 major freeways crisscross my district like a serpent that chokes the air out of a child's lungs. Pollution from cars, power plants, oil refineries, and factories makes even the simple act of breathing a struggle. And taxpayers end up paying the bill through constant emergency room visits and lost school and work days. Statewide, asthma. Asthma is the leading cause of absenteeism in our public schools. The cost of business should never be a negative health impacts for our children. This is simply not sustainable, and we need to change course. And that is why, Mr. President, colleagues, I rise today to present Senate Bill 350, the golden standards. For too long, the poor, the working communities, the working class families in our most polluted communities do not have the option to invest in renewable energy and clean, efficient transportation. But that is changing. I actually met Roy and Salvador last month when I visited their homes for a solar panel installation. Roy and Salvador's families are the first of many that will receive free solar panels through a program that uses our cap-and-trade dollars to help our most disproportionately impacted communities in the state of California. They are a growing and highly diverse movement to reduce climate change impacts and eliminate the harmful pollution that so many of our children are struggling today just to breathe. With the sun that is now pouring their home, Roy will save about $1,000 in utility bills this year alone. That amounts to about $22,800 over a course of 30 years. Salvador's family expects to save about 75% on their electricity bills in Fresno. And on top of that, their homes will be less dependent on electricity powered by the dirty fossil fuels that make it harder for them to breathe. Salvador and Roy told me that their energy savings will provide much energy relief, that they will have more money to help treat their lung diseases and meet other everyday needs. We're also getting more clean cars on the roads in the communities that suffer the most from polluted air. Just last week, Lorraine and Jose Mendoza from Stockton, California, got their keys to a new electrical vehicle after we crushed their high-polluting truck right outside the Capitol. Lorena and Jose and their 6 beautiful daughters, all honor class students, now have reliable transportation that will save them almost $3,600 a year in fuel costs. These 3 families provide a glimpse of what a future in renewable energy and cleaner cars look like for the state of California. This is what motivates me. to push our policies and our businesses forward to get us there. Setting these ambitious standards in SB 350 will spur innovation and investment and strengthen California's progress in building a 21st century economy that is sustainable. These standards are reasonable, achievable, and consistent with the framework that we have already established. Now, pollution doesn't recognize partisan lines, and neither has California's leadership on this issue. We passed AB 32 with bipartisan support, and then Republican Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger signed it into law. We're also seeing bipartisan action at the local level. The Honorable Rex Parris, the Republican mayor of the town of Lancaster, helped pass a measure to require that all new homes in this growing community install solar panels. He says his Republican free market principles informed him of this decision because solar power will save Lancaster households 15 to 30% on their utility bills. Leading companies, businesses in California like Apple, Google, Kaiser, KB Homes, Levi Strauss for your 501 Levi jeans, as well as The Gap, and investment giants such as Citicorp and Goldman Sachs all understand that renewable energy is a winning proposition. California already leads the nation in clean tech investment and job creation in the renewable energy sector. We have already proven that we can create jobs. Jobs are real, jobs are tangible, jobs that can't be outsourced or offshored elsewhere. We already proven we can lower utility bills and rebuild our energy infrastructure, all the while cleaning up the air that we breathe into our lungs and reducing our contribution to climate change. SB 350 will spur even more action from our public officials and our business leaders alike and make sure California keeps leading and building the new economy of tomorrow. Now, in conclusion, Mr. President, as well as colleagues, Nelson Mandela once said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Let's get it done. Let's continue to lead the world. Colleagues, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Great. Thank you, Senator De Leon. We'll now be followed by Senator Hertzberg. Okay, why don't we move on to Senator Hueso? Oh, Senator Hertzberg? Great. To be followed by Senators Hueso, Bates, Leno, and Stone. Senator Hertzberg.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. SB 350 is not a perfect bill, but it is an important and perfect idea. It does embody a vision for the future. Why? Because it achieves, in my judgment, two critical goals. One, reduces GHGs, which we know have an impact on our posterity, our highest calling. Two, it does what is essential for our California economy. It domesticates energy production. And by domesticating energy production in a globalizing world, it means localized jobs. We are in a place where the marketplace is challenging us tremendously and legitimately. We have to be Californians. We have to be creative to figure out how we can make that happen, how we can bring jobs here where instead of importing some asset that provides our energy, we can domesticate that. The status quo bellyachers throughout history have always been poor predictors of the future. Harper's Magazine said the Golden Gate Bridge will never carry any more traffic than the existing ferry system. The LA Times in 1931 said the Hoover Dam is at most a paper scheme. And the San Francisco Chronicle termed Pat Brown's State Water Project impossible. Impossible. Big visions are often met with this kind of skepticism. And it is about vision and the future that we have to focus. And it is the vision and the future that makes us the place that we talk about of being this great economy, of this great place of innovation. So of course you're going to hear from the skeptics. Let me tell you something. I'm not someone who villainizes the oil companies. They're doing what they do. How many people in the last week have used gasoline to move themselves from one part to the other? We are the predictors. If there was no market, they would not exist, right? In 1900, ladies and gentlemen, 40% of the cars in America were powered by steam, 38% by electricity, and only 22% by gasoline. 14 years later, 99% gasoline. Markets change. We transform. That doesn't mean we are frozen in a point in time. Vision is here for the energy production, and it's transformative, and that's what this measure is about. Look, if Blockbuster said it sought itself differently, it might be Netflix or YouTube. Ask Kodak or Photomat or Polaroid what would happen if you don't transform. Transformation is us. It is who we are. It is the essence of the message of the Pro Tems measure. So let me tell you, what I see is that by domesticating energy, we produced high-wage jobs in California. Is it difficult? Are there going to be transitions from the old model to the new? Yes. Okay. Tell that to the people in the Pony Express or the Telegraph. Welcome to America, baby. That's what it's about. And that's what this bill is about. I see it as an opportunity to shutter coal plants in other states because California's renewable energy policy. An opportunity, as I say, to domesticate transportation fuel production for electric cars or hydrogen, to produce water at a cheaper price, and other things that we haven't even thought of yet. And so the bottom line is that we're at a point in our time where the future is not and never will be fixed. The vision of this bill is right. It's right for California. It's right for our kids. I urge and I vote.
Thank you, Senator Hertzberg. Senator Hueso?
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senators, I also rise in support of the Pro Tems measure. SB 350 is an energy plan for the future. We are California, the Golden State. In California, we have found ways to turn sunlight into gold, to turn wind into gold, to turn steam from the ground into gold. We are the state that is the innovation state, the state that leads the world in new ideas. It's rightful that we begin to push a very aggressive policy on how California becomes the innovation state on not only creating jobs and creating power for the people of our state, but also in doing it in the way that saves the planet. Less and less, we're talking about how important it is to save our planet and how human activity is creating such a burden on the world's population. Currently, in China, in the Hunan province, there is acres, hundreds of acres and thousands of acres of land are being removed from the production of rice. You think of China, you think of rice. They can't grow rice in one of the most fertile areas in China. What does that mean? More consumption in China of California rice. Because we are better environmental stewards, we are selling rice to rice-producing countries. That is something to celebrate in California. In energy, we need to celebrate that we are leading the nation in job creation in the energy sector. We need to continue to move more aggressively in this area and continue to create jobs in our state. This is about jobs and the environment. Nobody wants to live next to a polluting, contaminating energy producer, whether it be a coal-powered plant or an oil-powered plant. In some parts of the world, there are countries, and in many cases commonwealths of the U.S., that are powering their commonwealths with almost 100% of petroleum power. You know, this is bad on the environment, bad for the consumers. In one instance, when the cost of a barrel of oil increased $10, $800 million left the state of, or the country of Puerto Rico in that instance. This is also about protecting our economy, about being energy independent. When we consume California products, our economy goes up. We are moving more toward consuming energy only from the state of California, and that will help our economy and help create quality jobs. So this is about, you know, creating jobs, but also checking the price on gas prices. Gas prices continue to go up. How do we combat that? How do we create options for Californians? Again, as my colleague mentioned, I don't want to pile on the oil companies either, but in February, we saw gas prices go up in a way that impacted Californians $500 million. $500 million went to gas companies from our consumers' pockets. That is not the best way to provide a great economy for California. This policy will ensure that jobs stay in California, and these jobs help to stabilize the cost of power in all sectors. This will reduce the cost of renewable energy. This will reduce the cost of petroleum at the pump. So we need to move forward with this, and I applaud our pro tem for taking on such a monumental issue. This will put California, or this will continue to put California on the map worldwide, and we should continue to do big things here in California that will help us increase our economy, and we're well on our way to do that with this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hueso. Senator Bates?
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I rise this morning respectively, certainly in opposition to SB 350, because the goals are certainly noble and necessary. However, how do we get there? What are the objectives and what are the tactics, actually, that this legislature is going to take responsibility for? The Sacramento Bee mentioned in its April 22nd editorial, SB 350 sets an ambitious goal, but it does not lay out how the state is to achieve that goal. Before they approve this far-reaching legislation, lawmakers need to get answers to basic questions and let the rest of us in on the details. Currently, the Air Resources Control Board, an unelected body, is implementing AB 32, which has resulted in businesses throughout California charged billions of dollars without legislative oversight or approval. That majority vote bill has resulted in 10-cent per gallon cost being added to gasoline as a result of putting gasoline production under cap and trade. According to our LAO, this is costing Californians $3 billion over 2 years. That does not help business or business production. That does not help job opportunities or job creation. Gasoline in California is already $1 per gallon higher than the rest of the country. Currently, California motorists use 36 million gallons of gas and 7 million gallons of diesel every day. SB 350 would require by 2030 that only 18 million gallons of gas and 3.5 million gallons of diesel be used every day. It doesn't say anything about what will replace that fuel. Will this critical decision be left to the California Air Resources Board? As members of the legislature, we should not give up our authority or our oversight to an unelected body. There should be parameters in the bill. Shouldn't the legislature have to approve any tax increase, fee increase, or any billion-dollar charge to California businesses that result from this bill? I think the law requires that. Members, climate change is an important issue. We need to be sure that we fight climate change by promoting good business practices, not by giving an unelected body unlimited authority to cost Californians billions in added costs with no legislative oversight. That will not get us to the other goals that we hold dear, that is job creation, lifting people out of poverty, and keeping our businesses strong and healthy. Until we have more bipartisan dialogue on the critical issues and commit to retaining the authority given to us by the electorate, I urge a no vote on SB 350.
Thank you, Senator Bates. Senator Stone?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I also rise in opposition to SB 350, with all due respects to the Senate Pro Tem. And just responding to just a few of the comments that I've heard so far, to my good friend and senator colleague from Los Angeles, he recommends that we have the domestication of our energy market here in the state of California. And I want him to know, and the rest of you to know, that I agree wholeheartedly that we need to do everything we can to domesticate our energy market here in the state of California. And I can tell you in my district, in the 28th district, we have done that. We've done that through probably the largest windmill energy generating plant, if you will, in the entire country. Windtech, one of my constituents, that derives a tremendous amount of energy from the wind that comes through the Coachella Valley. A program that I helped inspire called the HERO program in Riverside County, allowing people to finance solar panels and water efficiency infrastructure through their property taxes. A program that was so successful in Riverside County that we took it statewide, and we have dramatically impacted the utilization of renewable energy in my district. And we've talked about a transformation. I think a transformation to these goals is a very good aspiration. But we have to remember that we have been a petroleum-based industry now that made us the world's largest economy at one time because of our industrial revolution and that we have been oriented towards petroleum. We've reduced our petroleum consumption in this country by a significant amount, by hybrids, by electric cars, which has necessitated this body, because of the lack of taxes coming from the sale of gasoline because of the fuel efficiencies, to find alternative methods, such as vehicle miles traveled, to further tax our constituents. And we talk about jobs. Prematurely setting a deadline and putting the trust in unelected bodies to mandate changes in vehicles is going to cost jobs. And one of the reasons why most businesses are either leaving the state or refuse to come to the state is because of our high utility bills. I believe that we should let innovation drive this process, just like we've seen the Elon Musks of the world, that a lot of people didn't give them a lot of credit for developing an electric car that has taken off. Their stock has done fantastic. We're going to see a lot more electric cars on the market. Gas prices have been mentioned many times, and it seems as though we want to just vilify the oil companies. We have the highest gas prices in the country, not because of greedy oil companies, but because we have the highest gas taxes that we can't even claim go to fix our crumbling streets and roads. We divert that. We divert it and take away the trust that the citizens put in us in Prop 42 that said our gas taxes will be used to fix our roads and bridges. And what would this legislature in this city, in this ivory tower do? It told the citizens the tax you told us to use for your streets and roads, we are going to divert into our general fund. Well, we're back on firmer financial grounds. Let's keep our promise to the citizens. Let's return those monies back to our streets and roads and not ask for more taxes on our constituents. SB 350, my friends, is coastal elitism at the worst, an act that will cut jobs in the Central Valley communities to benefit rich urban areas that already have more jobs and economic diversity. This legislation will kill thousands of blue and white-collar jobs in the Central Valley and in the mountain and inland regions where industries like agriculture and trucking and even small businesses that depend on affordable energy. 64% of all the clean energy jobs and 75% of its newly created green jobs are found in the nation's 100 largest metro areas. Rural and smaller inland communities like I represent have been largely left out of the benefits of the green economy while bearing so much of the cost. The number of clean jobs created do not involve installing sleek new solar panels or manufacturing electric cars, but are in waste management and treatment garbage collectors. According to the Next 10, green jobs represent only 185,000 of the total 15.4 million jobs in our state. Even if we doubled or tripled the number of green jobs in California, we're talking about less than 5% of the jobs. Families losing their jobs cannot afford solar panels on their homes when they can no longer afford their homes because they have no job. And I'm not alone in my concerns. The good senator from Bell Gardens has expressed the same concern and said that the state's poorest residents, particularly Hispanics, will not enjoy the benefits of the clean energy economy. The same senator from Bell Gardens said, what we see And what we have continued to see is that the people are making themselves rich out of these technologies don't look like you and I and don't come from the economic experience and backgrounds that we share. The rural areas of our state are still experiencing double-digit unemployment. Fresno County, 10.2%. Kern County, 10.3%. Kings County, 10.8%. Madera County, 10.4%. Merced County, 11.6%. Stanislaus County, 9.6%. Tulare County, 11.5%. Yuba County, 9.3%. Imperial County, the highest in the state, 21.2% unemployment. Green jobs will not help the people in these communities find new jobs. In fact, it is this new mandate that will cut many of the jobs that pay well in these regions. What we need is a plan that encourages innovation. Let the innovators drive the process, not bureaucrats. Please don't vote yes. It will destroy our existing economy. I urge a no vote.
Thank you, Senator Stone. Senator Fuller.
Members, I respectfully rise to oppose 350. I feel that the goals are ambitious and the implementation is vague. I hope that we can use our wishes and our dreams as legislators to drive innovation, but it has failed more than it has succeeded. In my area, for example, which has 80% of the wind and solar production, and we're proud of it and we're happy to have it, it basically has resulted in a much smaller gain of green jobs than traditional energy jobs. They are much lower paying than the traditional energy jobs. So for me, I have two interests, and one is the working families, especially those in the San Joaquin Valley that have long distances to drive and cover, but also that my county will be totally devastated and the county revenues will shrink at the 50% cut. So it is the mandatory nature of this bill that I object to. It is the mandatory thought that innovation can be driven to come up with great new products, and that it doesn't matter what the cost is to the working families or to the development process. I believe in more energy. Obviously, I'm from the energy county. I think more energy is a great thing. But the mandates that try to drive innovation on a legislator's schedule, which is a dream, a wish, and a hope, but not founded on science, that I find difficult. I think that there have been more jobs in my county forced out than that have come in, and that's pretty easy to say given that we have a 10% unemployment. But mostly, I look at this as, so how can we get to a 50% cut when there are currently about 28 million registered vehicles in California and 92% of the transportation fuel in the state is petroleum? What are my constituents going to do if we cut petroleum by 50%, but they are still using cars that require petroleum? Will they all be required to buy new cars? There are approximately 120,000 electric vehicles on the road voluntarily today, which is a good thing. It would take 13 million electric vehicles to replace 50% of the gas and diesel we now use. That's a 130% increase in electric vehicles. Since 2012, California has spent $125 million to subsidize the purchase of 59,000 electric vehicles, which is half of those on the road. At that rate, the state would need to spend $28 billion to replace half the state's vehicles with electric cars. Folks, what happened to voluntary goals? What happened to incentives to help industry meet our deadlines? Even with the subsidy, our average hybrid costs thousands of dollars more than a comparable non-hybrid vehicle. What are my families going to do, especially those who will be out of jobs, especially those who have to drive long distances? The average range on a Tesla is 240 miles, and most of us need to drive 500 miles at a time. So what are we going to do? I beg you, the goals that we have and the problems that we are trying to solve are a common problem and a good goal and a good problem. But the market needs to do more of its share in its time, not the dreams and wishes and hopes that we can't sustain on the funding that we have.
Thank you, Senator Fuller. Senator Leno?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today as a proud joint author of SB 350. And I'm going to focus of the 350s on the 50% renewable portfolio standard. And I think it's important, as has been stated, this is a visionary bill, that we take a brief look back in history to see what we've accomplished in the past 15 years. When our former colleague, Senator Byron Scher, proposed that we have a 20% renewable portfolio standard in 2000, just 15 years ago, this building and the world thought he was out of his mind. The utilities went ballistic, could not be done. Job killer, the economy would be tanked. Well, within a few years, we saw that we not only could reach the 20%, but we could do it sooner than we thought we could. And our former colleague, Joe Simitian, picked up the banner and led the charge to raise that 20% to 33%. Same arguments were made against it. And guess what? A few years down the road, we realized we're going to get to that 33% faster than we thought we could. And what happened in the meantime? Well, according to the U.S. Energy Information Service, wind and solar are now less expensive per kilowatt hour than fossil fuels. Now, how did that happen? As the demand for this new energy and technology grew exponentially as a result of the RPS, the cost fell equally, ever in greater parity with fossil fuel costs, and now even less expensive. And if it's less expensive today, because the fuel is free, it will be even more so tomorrow, and much more so 15 years from today. The Advanced Energy Economic Institute has reported that our clean energy policies have led to the creation of 40,000 new businesses in California, over 430,000 new jobs, with an additional 70,000 to be created in the coming year. This bill is not a job killer. It is a major job creator. And in fact, the world's largest solar array is currently under construction in the Antelope Valley in Kern County. The world is following California's lead as we create more jobs at a faster pace toward a cleaner and more sustainable economy. The sun does rise in the West. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Leno. Senator Lara.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. You know, I wasn't going to speak today, but I felt compelled from the current discussion that's been going on. You know, I have been very critical of the environmental movement, and I'm still very critical, noting the fact that we have to diversify this movement if it is to survive in California and in the country. And I'm often concerned when I have folks from the western part of the LA County come and tell my constituents what they need to do to live healthier lives. Well, we can determine that on our own, and we can work these issues out amongst ourselves in trying to not only deal with the environmental justice issues that my community faces, but also create and support jobs in my community. Because it's very different to tell somebody, do you care about the environment, and at the stake of your job? And when you're a single mother, and this is the only option you have, that is not an easy decision to make. But I also understand, as somebody who represents Long Beach and Signal Hill, which, by the way, refine the state's oil supply and provide good-paying jobs in Southern California in my district and bring billions of dollars to the state fund, the general fund. I also understand the fact that we have to be visionaries. And for me, this is not a perfect proposal, but I also see the benefits, the great benefits it brings to our state and to our community, especially those communities that are disproportionately impacted by pollution. But I ask the environmental movement to let us determine what is priorities in our community. These funds are important. And just as we talk about cap and trade funding, it should go to these communities as it was intended, not to be divided amongst the state for everybody's pet project, but to help mitigate the problems and the environmental justice abuses that are happening in these poor communities up and down the state. And again, we're being asked to lead, members. Yesterday I said, you know, California is the most deliberative body in this country. And once again, we are being asked to stand and lead and do something. You know, quite honestly, if it wasn't for the leadership of this legislature, we would not have a solar industry in California or the country. We would not have an electric vehicle industry. We would not have an energy efficiency industry. We would not have a clean transportation and freight industry that is now rivaling any other country in this world. And so I do understand the importance of being at the vanguard of these technologies and promoting these important policies. But as we move forward, I ask that we seek that balance. And I think this bill seeks to do that. And I think if we look at the fact that we need to prioritize, if we're gonna continue to need oil, that it is prioritized for California oil extraction. Because these are jobs, members, that are important. And last time I checked, I don't want to sit in a solar airplane on a trip. And so this is a reality, members. This is a reality that we face. I commend my colleague, Senator De Leon, for being brave and tackling this issue. You guys all know that we're very close. We disagree on a lot of issues. But in particular, I commend him for being bold, because California is once again being asked to stand and lead, and that is what he's doing. I respectfully ask for an aye vote on this measure.
Thank you, Senator Lara. Senator Huff.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I can't help but chuckle a little bit as I hear some of the impassioned arguments here today and some of the, what I would consider faulty logic that goes with it. So let me just talk about a couple of things. You know, we were charged with the whole concept of all the horses we had before, and now we have cars, and who would have seen that change in technology? Did we outlaw hay? Did we put some kind of price on it and decide which technology, which would survive? No, we didn't. The number one business in the world now, Apple Computer, what did we do as a government to help create that? We stayed out of the way. Our number one sector in California is technology, biotechnology. What have we done to create that? We stayed out of their way. So here we have a changing economy that we want to say we are being asked to lead. By the way, who's asking that? We're being asked to lead, and in leading, we're picking winners and losers. Folks, this country is great because we haven't picked winners and losers. We've let the market decide what is effective, what works. We heard about how we're selling rice to Hunan province. You know, if you go to Hunan province and many other places in China, you'll see very small fields. And the mechanization that's there when it's not an ox out there pulling a plow by hand is a little Japanese rototiller type thing in these small irrigated fields. But the reality is we sell rice to China because we have an economy of scale, and yes, we have diesel-driven tractors that have a very long life. On our farm, we still have tractors over 50 years old, and they may emit more pollutants than before, but because they're not as used as much as transit buses and other things that are running around the clock, they have a long life. But the fact is, we're using fossil-based fuels to feed the world. So when we talk about all this changing technology, it reminds me after AB 32 is passed, I had the privilege of joining then Speaker Nunez in France as we were looking at high-speed rail, which was electric, and we were looking at their very high renewable portfolio standard. And he was very proud that France had attained 92%. And then I pointed out that 85% of that was driven by nuclear. Another 7% at that time was hydro. And we don't score any of those in California as renewable. So not only do we pick the technologies that are winners, and we pick the technologies that are losers, but we then put our thumb on the scale and say which renewables can't be used and which can. Likewise, I took a trip with CFE to Canada. In Canada, we have some agreement with Quebec. Canada is very good on renewables, but they've got all this hydro. And by the way, again, we don't score hydro. So why is it we as California want to take the burden of balancing a very noble goal of helping reduce greenhouse gases, but those gases don't stop at the California border. And when we stop burning fuel, coal for fuel, that doesn't stop Arizona or Oregon or other states from doing it, or China. And so we have a very lofty and noble goal, but other than feeling good about it, what has it actually accomplished? Wouldn't we be better off to set these great goals and let us figure out how to do it? One of the speakers was talking about how cheap, that wind and solar is now less than fossil fuel. Well, we have subsidized that, but let's assume that it didn't get that way because of subsidy, and let's take that at face value that it's true. Then if wind and solar is cheaper than fossil fuel, we don't need to set anything here. It will become like the automobile was to the horse, or that the Apple computer was, or any other computer, to a typewriter, which is an antique now as well. It will change without us having to regulate who the winners and who the losers are. We wonder about these middle-class jobs, and I heard a lot about the poor working-class families. Well, I worry about that too, because what I see in our emerging economy is a coastal elite winners and the inland, more rural losers. We have the very low unemployment in the coastal areas. We have very high unemployment, as was talked about previously, in the rural areas. So why is it that as we are emerging out of this great recession, that we have this dichotomy growing, and we're losing the middle-class jobs? Could it be because 84% higher electric costs for our industrial sector? We've lost it. We're still the #1 manufacturing state, but a lot of it is just assembling parts that come from other areas. But the heavy industry, the heavy manufacturing that used to be the backbone of California is gone. And with it, a lot of the great blue-collar jobs. We've lost significant portions of the aviation industry. We've lost automobile manufacturing except Tesla. And by the way, where did they create their battery plant? Right on the other side of the county line, or the state line, where they can benefit the market of California but not be burdened by our regulations. So, you know, I'm not saying don't set the goal, but let's not pick winners and losers. Let the market figure that out and sit back and see where it goes without us trying to direct the tiller. I ask for your no vote on this.
Thank you, Senator Huff. Senator Jackson? No, okay. Sounds like Senator De Leon. Well, are you prepared to close?
Yeah, Thank you very much, Mr. President, and colleagues. Thank you very much for a good debate. And I want to thank my colleagues from the other side of the aisle for a good debate. And I appreciate the feedback. A couple points I just want to either perhaps clarify or explain for further explanation. And by all means, offline, we can go a little deeper into the weeds if need be. But on the issue of CARB from the good senator from Orange County, just a couple things I just wanted to explain. Perhaps it would add a little clarification. The 50% in reduction of petroleum use, that requirement appears on page 4, line 20. On page 4, line 19, it does require the petroleum reduction to be cost-effective and technologically feasible. On page 5 of line 12, it requires any actions to be based on validated scientific and engineering data. And lastly, on the issue of CARB, on pages 5, lines 30 through 34, it explicitly requires an economic analysis that takes into account the impacts on fuel manufacturers, consumer acceptance, the state's competitive position with other neighboring states, chiefly Oregon, Washington, Arizona, and Nevada, and the cost to consumers. That is on page 5 of lines 30 and 34. I just want to, just for informational purposes, I think that we have drafted this bill in such a manner that is comprehensive, but parts of it are still ongoing without doubt. More than happy to engage with our colleagues. Now, the idea of the 50% reduction in petroleum use, I think perhaps there's a little misconception that the vast majority of it will actually come from a different formula mix with regards to gasoline itself. There's 3 main ordering principles for CARB. The first one's motor vehicle emission standards, which in short means better efficient engines. I think this is something that we can do with Detroit and we can do with other car manufacturers. We have done so here with Senator Fran Pavley. Her prior legislation helped make engines much more efficient in the country. In fact, if you buy a car in Alabama or Texas or North Dakota or Wyoming, if it's a Ford F-150 and you're up in Montana, those standards are California standards. If you're BMW and you manufacture in a right-to-work state like South Carolina, those standards are California standards. If you are Chrysler or Ford and you manufacture your car in Chihuahua, south of the border of Texas and Mexico, those are California standards that are actually driving the market in the United States of America. You have much more better efficiency with regards to your engine. 2, better mileage. We want better mileage out of the cars that are sold in the state of California. Who doesn't want to have more money in their pockets and actually go farther on a single tank of gasoline? Better efficiency and more mileage, better mileage for your car. So irrespective if you're from the Central Valley, Imperial Valley, Los Angeles, or San Francisco, who doesn't want more money in their pocket and actually get farther with a single tank of gasoline? So those are the main components right there. Now, with regards to the fuel content specifications, obviously it's about decarbonizing, if you will, gas. Now, a tank of gasoline, a gallon of gasoline or a tank of gasoline, obviously it's 90 to 95% oil petroleum base. What we're asking for is a tiny, modest fraction, if you will, with regards to biofuels. Now, this is not to take up the vast majority of your 50% reduction. It is about better efficiency in our vehicles. It's about stretching your dollar farther with maximizing the value of mileage in your car. Those are the current technologies that we're asking Detroit and others to develop in the state of California. And it is quite doable. Obviously, when you take octane, CH8 and H18, and you combine it with atmospheric oxygen, O2, that is the combustion that powers our engine. That creates your carbon, your CO2, your carbon dioxide, and that's water, HO2. That is the power that actually moves goods in the state of California. If you didn't know the chemical balance and the reaction, what actually moves your Ford F-150 down Highway 99 or 5, that's what actually does right there. So just on the issue of CARB, I just wanted to explain it, and as well as the fuel-specific content. And also, I won't get into details about vehicle miles traveled, but that's just a couple important points with regards to the petroleum reduction of 2030. Now, a couple last points I just want to make. I won't get into energy efficiency since it wasn't an issue that we talked about today, but on the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, we have made great strides in the state of California. It was mentioned earlier today by the senator from San Francisco that with then Senator Byron Scher, when we talked about a 20% renewable portfolio, everyone thought that the Senate was crazy. It was actually out of reach. It was naive to set unrealistic targets such as 20%. Well, I can say this. We're well on our way to hitting 33% by the year 2020. In fact, if you notice in the details of the analysis, whether it's Republican or Democrat, the IOUs, that being Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, as well as Sempra, San Diego Gas and Electric, are not in opposition to 350. They have taken a neutral position. In fact, I'm not in a position to share the information. They will share it on their own. But in fact, a few of the IOUs are well on their way to reaching the 33%, not at 2020, but way before 2020, probably in 2017. So the idea of hitting 50% renewable portfolio by the year 2030 is as realistic and as doable as can be. We're actually having very constructive negotiations right now with the IOUs as we speak right now. Very constructive. They want issue of flexibility. The measure provides for flexibility with regards to renewable generation, say, for example, from Wyoming, which is a red state. If you can bring wind in power from Wyoming and it's connected to the grid, Cal ISO, it's acceptable. If you want to bring in and harness the power of the sun from Utah, another red state who wants to export their energy, as well as Arizona, another red state who want to export the power of the sun, if you're connected to the grid, Cal ISO, you can export that to California and we can import it. These are 3 red states. We're getting into the game when it comes to renewable sources. I won't get into the issue of overgeneration, if you will, demand storage and energy efficiency, but if you have any questions on those issues, again, I'd be more than happy to explain and go into further detail forensically in the weeds on the issue of overgeneration with regards to the Cal ISO and demand storage as we relate to peak hours when the wind is not blowing and when the sun is not shining. And what do we do to make sure that we provide energy at a low cost to all the ratepayers in the state of California? Colleagues, this is doable. And a couple points lastly I want to make is we talked about coastal elitism. And part of my speech when I opened up my comments was about Salvador Mendoza. And it was about Roy, and it was about the Jose and Lorraine Mendoza. And I do believe strongly, I believe in the arguments, that if you had the financial wherewithal to drive a Tesla, and if you actually drew down on a tax credit for Tesla, is that actually fair? Or should we make sure every individual, irrespective of who you are and where you come from, the color of your skin and your region, whether you live in the Imperial or Central Valley, in Compton or East Oakland or East LA, that they have access to credits that they can bundle and they can drive themselves, or Salinas or Watsonville, where they can drive a vehicle that's affordable, that's electric or a hybrid plug-in, if you will. It's about the policies that we enact on this floor that democratize this process so we do away with the marketplace that today has not corrected the inequities. That's the power of this legislature. Democrats and Republicans working together to move with a sense of intentionality. Because a couple of theses, there was a thesis that was put forth, I think, that I give credence to, that the marketplace as of today hasn't yet been able to correct these inequities. And we talk about winners and losers, but I think that's a canard, because winners and losers already have been selected and chosen. No one talks about the massive subsidies that the fossil fuel industry receives on an annual basis. In fact, just last month, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, produced a report that 6.5% of global GDP, 6.5% of global GDP is dedicated both directly as well as indirectly as a subsidy to the fossil fuel industry. That's $5 trillion. $5 trillion. Those are subsidies. And those subsidies through policies, especially at the federal level, have been selected to pick a winner and a loser. So this is about economic growth. Because as to date, we have created 55,000 brand new jobs in the solar industry. We are projected by the end of this calendar year to create another 10,000. So it'll be 65,000 new jobs. We talk about the economically depressed areas, which are absolutely accurate. Central Valley, Imperial Valley. But to date, I have not seen the fossil fuel industry or any other industry put forth any reasonable economic growth policy for the working men and women of these areas. But when it comes to renewable energy, that is the future. And those jobs are real and those jobs are tangible. And that can bring out, working class people out from poverty, the stubborn poverty that exists, into the middle class. We're talking about creating a new economy for tomorrow because the status quo, quite frankly, is not working. And our children in the Central Valley, whether Republican or Democrat, in the Imperial Valley, are breathing into their lungs these harmful toxins and pollutants, which we as taxpayers are subsidizing through the emergency room visits. So it's nonsensical that we continue with the status quo. Now, lastly, again, last weekend we had Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day weekend in Kern County, in the city of Bakersfield, to be exact. Memorial Day weekend, a gallon of gasoline was $3.70. A month ago, it was $3.48. But now it just dropped to $3.66. In Fresno, a month ago, a gallon of gasoline was $3.53. That's regular. Memorial Day weekend, it increased to $3.60. Now all of a sudden, it just dropped back down again to $3.50. And I have city after city after city and county after county after county. Why does gasoline rise all of a sudden during Memorial Day weekend? Well, one can go to Economics 101, supply and demand. I get the supply. Why? No. I get the demand because people are going to travel, during the course of the weekend. But the supply is quite fascinating because it's one of the greatest conundrums that we have today, one of the great mysteries of the world. We have the Bermuda Triangle, we have Roswell, Area 51, and we also have the great mystery. How are gasoline prices actually formulated in the state of California? And why do gasoline prices rise through the roof all of a sudden when there's a refinery maintenance shutdown or there's an explosion at a certain center? So this is about our taxpayers. This is about our constituents. This is about our public health. This is about economic growth. More than happy to work with my Republican colleagues so we can put something together that's bipartisan. They did it in Lancaster, and you have a mayor, a Republican mayor, arch-conservative city, where all city council members are arch-conservatives, Republicans in Texas that have moved forward with the renewable policy because dollars and cents, it makes sense. With that, Mr. President, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator De Leon. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. No. Bates. No. Bell. Aye. Berryhill. No. Block. Aye. Canella. No. De Leon. Aye. Fuller. Gaines.
No.
No. Galgiani. Glazer. Aye. Hall. Aye. Hancock. Aye. Hernandez. Aye. Hertzberg. Aye. Hill. Aye. Wesso. Aye. Huff. No. Jackson. Aye. Lada. Aye. Leno. Aye. Leva. Aye. Liu. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Mendoza. Aye. Mitchell. Aye. Monning. Aye. Morlock. No. Morrell. No. Wynn. No. Nielsen. Pan. Aye. Pavley. Aye. Roth. Runner. No. Stone. No. Vidak. No. Wykowski. Aye. Wolk. Wolk, aye. Fuller,
All
no.
absent members?
Galgiani. No. Nielsen. Roth.
Ayes 24, noes 14. Measure passes. Members, we've got a lot of